Welcome back to Grade 8 History, Unit number 2, Canada's Changing Society, 1890 to 1914. This is lesson number 15. How did people respond to the challenge of industrialization? Before we begin today's lesson, let's consider the following. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, how might working class Canadians show they wanted better wages and working conditions? After I finish speaking, I want you to put the video on pause so that you can consider this question and write down your response. And I'll look forward to hearing everybody's responses to this question at the start of tomorrow's class. Please put the video on pause now. All right, let's get started. As more goods were manufactured and sold in Canada, business owners made higher profits. However, the workers who produced the goods did not benefit. Many working class families suffered from poverty, unemployment, and disease. These problems inspired a series of reforms that would enable everyone to benefit from industrialization. The movement to address these problems was called progressivism. The growing financial gap between employer and employee was a source of conflict in the workplace. Workers wanted change, but owners wanted to keep making high profits. This led an increasing number of workers to form unions. Unions could stand up to business owners and demand better pay and better rights for workers. If an owner threatened to fire or punish a worker for refusing to work overtime, the union could step in and stop the owner. Union members could go on strike, causing production to halt and forcing the owner to listen to the union and its members. In 1872, the federal government passed the Trade Union Act, which made unions legal in Canada. Trade unions were organizations that working class men from the same trade could join to support each other. In practice, only skilled workers could take strike action. Unskilled workers, many of them women and children, would not be allowed to join a union. The Knights of Labor took a different approach to unionization. This organization was open to all workers, regardless of their skills. It wanted to join all of the unions together in order to make one stronger union which could better fight for higher wages, better working conditions, and laws that would protect workers' rights, such as an 8-hour workday. The Knights were also different in that they welcomed women into their organization. And here's a picture showing a parade uh, with members of the Knights of Labor walking down the street. My question for you is, what does this photo tell you about the popularity of the Knights of Labor? Please put the video on pause so that you can write down your response to this question. Okay, let's continue. Unfortunately, by the early 1900s, the approach towards separate unions for separate trades won out in Canada. The Trades and Labor Congress eventually banned the Knights of Labor from its membership in 1902. As the most powerful political force for Canadian labor, the Trades and Labor Congress did push for better working conditions. It did not, however, push for the economic changes that the Knights had demanded. And through a merger in 1956, the Trades and Labor Congress became part of the Canadian Labor Congress, which still exists today. In 1899, streetcar workers in London, Ontario went on strike. The strikers refused to return to work until the owner, Henry Everett, raised their wages and shortened their hours. Everett refused to be pressured. He locked the workers out and replaced them with non-unionized employees called strikebreakers. The conflict escalated in the summer as Londoners supported the strikers. Thousands of people attended rallies and boycotted the streetcar service. That is, they refused to use the streetcar system. When the boycotts proved unsuccessful, people turned to violent action. Riots broke out, and people threw rocks at streetcars driven by the strikebreakers. And here's a photo of London, Ontario, prior to the outbreak of hostilities in the summer of 1899. And it was quite a peaceful town. It would go back to being a peaceful town after that violent summer. Everett turned to the support of Canadian troops, who came in and restored order. While the Amalgamated Association of Street Railway Employees, the union that represented the strikers, claimed it had not been broken, the strikers were unsuccessful in getting Everett to meet their demands. Eventually, Londoners began taking the streetcars again. Most strikers were permanently replaced with non-unionized workers and had to find work elsewhere. Streetcar workers in other cities, such as Hamilton, Toronto, Montreal, began holding strikes, and the militia was called into these cities to stop the strike action. As the number of strikes across the country increased, business owners increased their pressure on the government to stop unionization and strikes. However, when a provincial government sent troops to end a strike, the situation tended to get worse. In some cases, workers walked off the job to protest the government's interference in the conflict. Issues over working conditions sometimes overlapped with movements to address other social issues. For example, by the 1890s, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, or WCTU, and other organizations had been campaigning for women's right to vote for over a decade. The WCTU and the Dominion Women's Enfranchisement Association, or DWEA, held a mock parliament in Toronto in 1896 to pressure the government to give women in Ontario the right to vote. Unfortunately, it would take another 20 years before women in Ontario received this right. It took even longer in other provinces. And here on the left is Sir Oliver Mowat, who was the Premier of Ontario in 1896. He said he was not against giving women the right to vote, but he felt there would not be enough public support for it. Emily Stowe, on the right, would play the part of Mowat in the mock parliament held in 1896. An increasing number of people were opposed to children working in factories in harsh conditions. One such person was Toronto reporter John Joseph Kelso, who was a known child advocate. He wrote a series of articles about neglected children in the city. His fear was that children who lived on the streets and did not go to school would eventually become criminals. Kelso helped to found the Toronto Children's Aid Society in 1891. And looking at this admittedly faded illustration, you'll need to put the video on pause, of course, to take a closer look. But my question for you is, how does this illustration try to persuade the reader of the need to protect children? Please put the video on pause now so that you can tackle this question. Okay, moving on. Due in part to Kelso's efforts, the Ontario government passed the Children's Charter in 1893. It protected children from abandonment, mistreatment, and neglect. The government appointed Kelso to the new post of Superintendent of Neglected Children. Kelso established 56 children's aid societies across Ontario, and he helped other provinces set up child protection laws and programs. He was a co-founder of the Toronto Fresh Air Fund in 1888. This organization raised money to send poor children to the country for a break from the heat and filth of summer in the city. Okay, and just to wrap up, a couple of final questions to consider and we'll talk about in class tomorrow. Number one, how are trade unions important to the working class in Canada? And number two, do you see any pattern to the conflicts and their causes during this period? So when I'm done speaking, you're going to put the video on pause so that you can write down your responses to these two questions. If you don't feel confident in your ability to do this, it means you need to go back and watch this video at least one more time. And then when you're ready, please put the video on pause. Okay, and I look forward to a lively discussion based on your responses to these and all of the other questions posted in this video. But until tomorrow's class, this concludes today's video.